Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining my monthly book review. This month, we will be reviewing A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James, which won the Man Booker Prize in 2015. As you can see, it is anything but a brief novel. It's quite epic. And today I'm not cooking, but I am actually drinking a chocolate, which, for those of you who don't know, is a mixture of peanut punch, a national favorite in Trinidad, and cocoa. So basically, you mix the peanut punch and then you add some cocoa and you blend it up. Usually, back home, we would make our chocolates with or peanut punch with condensed milk, but I didn't have any condensed milk this morning, so I just used some good old Demerara sugar. So just to jump right into the novel, let me just give you an overview of what it's about. It is set in Jamaica, and it starts off with the lead up to the attempted assassination of Bob Marley, who's known in the book as the singer. And then it continues on after the attempted assassination into the 1980s and early 90s of Jamaican society and Jamaica in the wider world. So in the book, in the lead up, we're placed in this ghetto city the ghetto in Kingston, Jamaica. So we have two leading rival gangs, which are known as Copenhagen City and Eight Lanes in the book. Of course, they're representative of actual gangs in Kingston, Jamaica. And they're both backed by the political parties, the two opposing political parties. So a lot of it takes place with Copenhagen City Gang because that's the gang that carries out the attempted assassination on Bob Marley. But we also hear a bit about Eight Lanes. So it starts off actually with the story of Bam Bam, who is originally from Eight Lanes, and he witnesses his father's death, and he runs away, and he goes to Copenhagen City, and there Papalo, who's the head of Copenhagen City gang, he kind of sees that okay, probably I could use Bam Bam in the future to get back at Eight Lanes, so he keeps him alive. He doesn't actually kill him off because he's a little boy as well. So that's how we kind of get the two gangs. That's how Marlon James kind of introduces these two gangs and the war. And then, of course, we have the politicians who are also spurring on this gang rivalry between the two. So he really sets the scene in terms of what's happening in Kingston at that time. It's a lead up to elections time. And the singer Bob Marley, he's going to have a peace concert where he's going to perform. And the political party who is the opposing political party, they don't like this because Bob Marley is originally, of course, from the Eight Lanes area, and it's the PNP who is sponsoring this peace concert. So they see him as a kind of traitor. And of course, the political parties don't want peace because they can't thrive on the gang rivalry if there is peace. So there is that aspect of politics which is involved in it. And then we have the night of the attempted assassination. And what follows on is that after we see that the singer becomes more of a symbol of peace, that's never actually achieved, unfortunately. And we see Jamaica now in the wider world. So we always have that kind of aspect of Jamaica not being in isolation, even in the lead up, because it's the CIA who actually infiltrate Jamaica and they train the Copenhagen City gangs how to use these weapons and these guns, which they bring into the country. And of course, that's because we're in the 1970s, so it's during the Cold War in the world, and PNP, they see the next party as socialists, and the CIA see them as socialist, communists. According to Bob Marley, the ism and schisms, he uses a lot of Bob Marley quotes throughout the novel. So Marlon James really sets Jamaica within the wider world and what is happening. We even see the CIA alluding to, and one of the CIA agents talks about when he was in Chile. So that would be with the Allende regime when Allende was taken over by the Pinochet dictatorship. So they have that, the past. And then afterwards, we go into the 1980s, into 90s. So we see the drug trade, which starts from Colombia through Jamaica into the US. So we have the different posses, which are gangs as well, but in the US they're called posses in the book. And they continue this. They're Jamaicans from Jamaica who've moved up to the US. And we see we're introduced to Griselda Blanco, of course, who was the queen of cocaine during those times. They talk about the Medellin cartel and the Cali cartel, which were the two main drug cartels, cocaine exporters in Colombia at that time. So it really, what I liked a lot about the novel is that a lot of it takes place in Jamaica, and he talks and shows us a lot of Jamaican society. But at the same time, we see Jamaica as part of a puzzle of the whole world and what was happening in the world at that time. So it's really interesting that way. So that's just a sort of overview of it. To really jump into the themes now, the first thing that you just have to get out there is that it's an extremely violent book. It's not just violent in terms of, okay, we have like this one got shot and there are 10 killings in a scene or something like that. No, it's explicitly violent. And he sets it up. So I'm going to read a quote actually, because he sets the scene of ghetto life in the beginning of the novel to know where it is we are actually, all of this is actually taking place. So I'm going to read now. In the 8 lanes and in Copenhagen City, all you can do is watch. Sweet talking voice on the radio say that crime and violence are taking over the country. And if change ever going to come, then we will have to wait and see. But all we can do down here in the 8 lanes is see and wait. And I see shit water run free down the street and I wait. And I see my mother take 2 men for $20 each and one more who paid $25 to stay in instead of pull out, and I wait. And I watch my father get so sick and tired of her that he beat her like a dog. And I see the zinc on the roof rust itself brown, and then the rain batter hole into it like foreign cheese. And I see 7 people in one room, and 1 pregnant, and people fucking anyway, because people so poor that they can't even afford shame, and I wait. And the little room gets smaller and smaller, and more sister, brother, cousin come from country. The city getting bigger and bigger, and there be no place to rub-a-dub or cut your shit, and no chicken back to curry, and even when there is, it still costs too much money. And that little girl gets stabbed because they know she get lunch money every Tuesday. And the boys like me getting older and not in school very regular, and can't read Dick and Jane but no Coca-Cola, and want to go to a studio and cut a tune and sing songs and ride the rhythm out of the ghetto. But Copenhagen City and the 8 lanes both too big, and every time you reach the edge move ahead of you like a shadow until the whole world is a ghetto, and you wait. By the time boy like me drop out of my mother, she give up. Preacher says there's a God-shaped void in everybody's life, but the only thing ghetto people can fill a void with is void. 1972 is nothing like 1962. And people still whispering, for they could never shout that when Artie Jennings dead, all of a sudden he take the dream with him. The dream of what? I don't know. People stupid. The dream didn't leave. People just don't know a nightmare when they're right in the middle of one. More people start moving to the ghetto because Delroy Wilson just sing that better must come. And the man who will be prime minister sing it too. Better must come. But worse come first. So, you could see, first of all, a lot of things stand out there. It is written mostly in Jamaican patois. So, of course, being a Trini, I am going to say thanks to Samuel Selvon, who was the first one to write in dialect English. So we have it. So now it's very popular. I mean, almost all West Indian novels are written in the dialect language. So it's very nice that it's written in the Jamaican patois. When I was reading this book, I actually also had it on Audibles because I run a lot, so it's easy for me to to listen on audibles when I run. And also, if I'm taking care of my baby who's 10 months old, sometimes I might put on audibles while I rock her to sleep. No, not while I'm actually playing with her. If I'm rocking her to sleep or if she's sleeping on me or something, I'll have it on my headphones. And it was very nice because if you do decide to read it, I highly recommend that you get the audibles because the Jamaican voices are really good and the narration is really good. And it really helps you to understand the Jamaican patois if you're not too familiar with it, like me. I'm not too familiar with Jamaican patois, so it really helped me a lot. However, that being said, listening to it on audibles, it actually brings the violence. It makes it a lot more real. So it starts off with this very violent scene with Bam Bam. This is not the first time I read this book. I attempted to read it a few years back. And the initial scene with Bam Bam was so violent that I couldn't go past it. And I returned it on Audible. So when they asked for my reason for a refund, I had put that it was just too violent. But then I decided to try again because my brother recommended it. And Bam Bam is actually born in 8 Lanes. And he witnesses his dad who is sexually abused, violated before being murdered. And then his mom comes in laughing because she brought the men to murder him. And they murder her as well. And she falls. So Bam Bam is hiding underneath the sheets. And when she falls after being killed, she falls on top of him. So they don't find him. And when they leave, he sees his father's ghost telling him to run because they're going to come back looking for him and come back looking for things to steal. So he has to run. So he runs and he leaves 8 Lanes and he goes to Copenhagen City, where he meets Papalo, who's the head of Copenhagen City Gang. And Papalo pardons his life because Papalo asks him if you want to ever get back at those guys at 8 Lanes. And he says yes as a little boy. So Papalo sees, this hatred that he could probably use in the future. So he keeps him alive. So that is one of the very violent scenes. And then the same Bam Bam, later on, he is one of the guys that they use for the attempted assassination. So they actually get him hooked on cocaine. And because he wants his snort of cocaine, he wants his high, he's basically their puppet, so they could use him to kill or whatever. So he is recruited as one of the boys to go and carry out the attempted assassination on Bob Marley in the house. And then after that, we see the two main gang leaders who carried out this attempted assassination, who were Josie Wales and Weeper in the novel. They kill out the other boys, and Bam Bam is killed very violently again. Bam Bam is buried alive. So from the beginning of the novel, I'm not giving any spoilers, because from the beginning of the novel, the introduction, they say the first boy to die is buried alive, and that's Bam Bam. So it kind of makes you wonder, about how disposable life is in the ghetto in Jamaica in this novel. And it's really frightening, actually. In fact, when I was listening, because I actually listened to this part with Bam Bam being buried alive, it was very traumatizing for me, especially because I was actually rocking my baby to sleep and I had on my headphones and I was listening to that. And Bam Bam, when he is dying, being buried alive, he reverts to a child. So the same child that witnesses his father being sexually violated and then murdered and his mom murdered, he becomes that child again while he is being buried alive. And there I was in this kind of maternal moment, rocking my baby to sleep and listening. So I had to actually switch it off and I just decided to sing instead. And then I went back to it later reading because it was just too much listening to that. So it kind of, and that's it. That's the next thing with the book. You can't just hate the characters because even though they all do really horrible stuff in the novel, he also shows their human side. Now, I don't want to say that he has criminals with a conscience because that would be wrong. You don't a lot of times you don't see them regretting being violent. In fact, Papalo, who's the head of Copenhagen City, at a point in time when he starts to side with Bob Marley, because he and Bob Marley grew up together. So even though Bob Marley is originally from 8 Lanes before the Kingston was cut up, he knew Bob Marley. And people think that, Papalo has gotten soft because one day he killed a boy. And when he realized it was a schoolboy he killed, it bothered him. But then we hear Papalo's version of the story. And Papalo is saying that actually it doesn't take anything to kill a man, and people think that he got soft because of that, but what really bothered him was that he felt nothing when he saw that was a young schoolboy that he killed. And we see, so they don't have, it's not like they would go on and regret, oh, I killed this person. Papalo, who is probably one of the most likable characters in the book, he beats a man till he bleeds. He cuffs down a woman. Even though he eradicates rape from Copenhagen City, we see him do really brutal stuff, really violent stuff. However, at the same time, Marlon James kind of shows that they are human too. So we have these characters like Papalo and Josie Wales, who is his understudy, his right-hand man, who then usurps him eventually. Where there are moments where you like them and you listen to them and you're interested, and they speak sense and they kind of reveal that world to you. So it's really interesting what he does. And I think he achieves this by his narrative style, because we get the same story. It's always the same story, but every chapter is a different character that narrates. And then we jump from character to character. So Papalo will narrate something, and then we will have that same scene being narrated by Josie Wales, and so on. So because of that, we get to see the different perspectives of the novel and of the storyline and what's happening. So that's really interesting. But the violence in the society is pervasive. It's all over. Even there's a scene where Nina Burgess, she is an upper middle class person who has sexual relations with the singer. And she is trying to get money from the singer to help her family move abroad. So even though her family is upper middle class, they still were victims of robbery, and the mother perhaps rape. Is never confirmed whether the mother was raped or not. So we see that the violence is not just only in the ghetto, but it's also within wider society. So they could also be victims of it. And there's a scene when she's waiting for the singer to be let inside, and she's never let in, and then she ends up having to go home late, and there's a curfew in Kingston at the time. And she's picked up by police officers, and she thinks that they're going to rape her. In fact, they probably are going to rape her. But because she just gets so tired, she's so tired from waiting and the whole situation and stuff, she's basically like, if you're going to rape me, just rape me and dump me wherever you'll dump these bodies. And it kind of shocks them, so they drop her home. Now, you would think that when she reaches home and she's not raped or dead, there would be this sort of relief, but it just goes straight into another violent scene in her life, where she wakes up the next morning and her parents call her home, and then she and her parents get into this awful fight because her parents find out that she had these sexual relations with the singer. And the mom calls her a slut and a hoe, and she tells her how she's dirty, and if down there not itching because of lice. So in terms of this was actually probably naively shocking for me, because, we see Bob Marley as this icon, but it kind of shows how he was perceived by the other classes in Jamaica back then. So that Nina Burgess's sister, whose name is Kimmy, she is actually also with a Rasta man, but because he is from that same middle class, when Nina is being insulted by her mom. She's telling her mom, but your next daughter is also with a Rasta man. Why are you only insulting me? And the mother is like, oh, that's just a phase he's going through. It's not the same. He's not the same kind of Rasta. And basically, what is the difference? The difference is that Bob Marley is from the ghetto, and Kimmy's, her sister's Rasta, a boyfriend, is not from the ghetto, so it's more acceptable. And then we see the father who comes and he beats Kimmy, and then Kimmy turns on the father and beats him. So it's really a very violent society that Marlon James paints in this. And we feel that for Nina, the only way she could actually escape this violence is if she leaves Jamaica altogether, which she does. Eventually, she moves to the United States and she changes her identity many different times in the novel. So, towards the end of the novel, when we meet her back under, I think she's Millicent. Millicent by then, she doesn't even want to associate herself with Jamaica. So there's the gangs up there are now at war because Benji, who is Josie Wales' son, was killed. So that whole gang violence erupts and it overflows into New York. So those different posses got war, and she's a nurse in the hospital, and she sees the Jamaicans coming in, and she just doesn't want to be associated with them. So even though she goes and she keeps, but yet she feels that pull that she needs to go and check and see what's happening. So she would go and check, and one of the men, his wife or his girlfriend, significant other, is there, and she's like, why you keep on coming, or whatever, what's happening, etc. And she puts on an American accent. She says she's from the Bronx, but she can't really hide her Jamaicanness. So the lady eventually finds out that she is indeed Jamaican, and then all of a sudden Nina comes back. Well, she's still called Millicent, but her Jamaican identity comes, and she starts to chat bad, as he puts. That's whenever they use Jamaican patois, they chat bad. And then after she goes to a Jamaican restaurant and she orders basically everything on the menu, and she's enjoying the food and so on. So we see that struggle that Nina Burgess has with her Jamaican identity, where she wants to just leave Jamaica behind. She doesn't want to have anything to do with Jamaica, but yet she still feels that pull. She can't really help but be Jamaican. Another scene with this whole Jamaican identity is with Josie Wales. So Josie Wales is Papa Lou's right-hand man, but then Josie Wales kind of goes again, well, he goes behind Papa Lou's back, and he is actually the mastermind of the whole attempted assassination on the singer. And Papalo eventually figures it out, but because it's Josie Wales, he doesn't actually want to punish Josie Wales because Josie Wales is so powerful at that time. So Josie Wales, with his identity, he is very proud to be Jamaican, in that when he is dealing, because he becomes in charge of the whole drug trade later on, between the Medellin and the Cali cartel and the US. And when he's having dealings with Jamaicans who are living in New York, he gets irritated when they use Americanisms, and he says he hates when Jamaicans go up and they start to use Americanisms. But at the same time, Josie Wales hates when people chat bad. So you see scenes of him buffing up his son, telling him, am I not sending you to school? Why are you talking like that? And then there's a scene when Papalo comes to ask him about the attempted assassination, and he says if it's one way that you make a man know that this conversation is finished is to talk standard English. And he thinks very highly of himself, and he very prides himself on not talking in Jamaican patois. But at the same time, he's still very proud to be Jamaican. So even when he goes to to New York, they want to carry him to eat Jamaican food, and he's like, you think I come to New York to eat second class Jamaican food? So we have that kind of difference in identity, like what is this Jamaican identity? And strangely enough, the foreigners, so we have some foreigners within the novel who are either journalists that came to cover the peace concert or CIA agents, and they seem to all know what the real Jamaica is. So they all say, "Oh no, I know the real Jamaica." And to them, it is not being just in like Mobe and some fancy hotel. It is having actually gone to the singer's home or gone down to Kingston or dealt with some of these gangsters. So they say, yeah, I know the real Jamaica. So they seem quite convinced of what the real Jamaica is. But the Jamaicans seem to, within the novel, seem to have this kind of identity. I'm not going to say identity crisis, but this struggle with their identity. So that was really nice for him to actually deal with the language and the Jamaican patois, because I mean, even in Trinidad, a big sign that you are educated is if you're able to speak standard English. I'm even doing this whole presentation in standard English. But yet, there's a certain emotion that you can't get out in standard English that you would revert to your local dialect to get out. And Marlon James really does that very well. So a lot of the dialogue, is in dialect. And it's really nice to read it. There's a lot of lyricism. He drops a lot of Bob Marley quotes, and there's a lot of music. So he talks about Night Nurse being played by Gregory Isaac. And then each part of the book has different parts, is after different records. So he has a lot of Jamaican culture, a lot of Jamaican music in the book. And so it's very violent, and there's the music, and then even within the violence we have this whole morality compass where, as I was saying, you tend to like some of them. And Papalo, who is my favorite character in the novel, he comes to the realization that in the ghetto they're just all pawns, and it's really these political parties are just using them. So how this happens is that he is actually caught by the police officers, and he's put in jail the night of the attempted assassination. And Shutter Sheriff, who's the head of 8 Lanes gang, is also caught and put in jail. And he's saying, like, in jail they always have members of both gangs, of the rivaling gangs there. So what they decided to do was to put them together and hope that they just kill out each other. But that doesn't happen. They kind of reach a truce. So I'm just going to read that little part for you. Shutter Sheriff sent message later saying, "It's true time we fi talk. When puss and dog kill one another, the only one who win is Babylon. Me take this reasoning and me reason pon it more. Babylon is a country. Babylon is a shitstem. Babylon is oppressor, and Babylon infiltrate with police. Babylon get tired of waiting, so he put head puss and head dog in lockup for them to kill each other quick. But a different vibration come down pon the lockup, a positive vibration." So we see this truce develop in the jail, where Shutter Sheriff and Papalo eventually start to play dominoes together in jail, and there's no killing. So initially there's a guy, one of the Copenhagen City gang members, who goes and kills a 8 Lane gang member, and that's why Shutter Sheriff initially wants to come and get back at Papalo, but Papalo says, "But I never attempted to kill you. Why you want to come at me at 4?" And then that's when they get this whole truce, and they realize that, you know what, the only people who win in this if we kill out each other is Babylon, or the police in this case. So they come together, and and when they're let out of jail, we see the two gangs actually being very peaceful with each other, and they're going to concerts. And Josie Wales is upset because he's saying some guy who killed his cousin come, like he wanted a hug, but Josie Wales now has a different perception of it all, and he doesn't believe that they could effectively have peace. So Josie Wales His interpretation of it is let me just read it. People think that I have animosity towards Papalou. Me have nothing but love for the man, and I would say the same to anybody who asks. But this is ghetto. In the ghetto, there is no such thing as peace. There is only this fact. Your power to kill me can only be stopped by my power to kill you. You have people living in the ghetto who can only see within it. From me was a young boy, all I could see was outside it. I wake up looking out. So Josie Wales doesn't really believe in this whole peace talk, and he sees that this is a ghetto. We don't have time for peace, and if we put down our guns and 8 lanes put down our guns, that's when the police will pick up their guns and they will kill all of us. So this is when he decides to look out, and he starts his business with the drug trade, and we go on and we introduce the Griselda Blanc and Medellin cartel and so on. And then eventually we get this whole idea that it's just a cycle, because towards the end, Josie Wales also dies a very violent death. He is burnt in his cell. So, as Bob Marley said, and as he says in the book a few times, many more will have to suffer, many more will have to die. And we really get that sense of it being cyclical, that every time one goes down, there's somebody else, a new dawn that rises up. So the new dawn after Josie Wales dies is Yubi, who is in the United States. And Yubi is also Jamaican, but he's not from the ghetto. He is middle class, well-educated Jamaican. And we get the idea that this is just going on. And so even though Josie Wales dies, and for Nina Burgess, who witnessed something that Josie Wales did, it's a huge relief for her. We still get that tension. It ends on a very tense scene with Nina Burgess answering the phone and nobody talking, and then she screams out her sister's name because she knows it's her sister who is calling, who found her, and so on. So once again, Nina Burgess, she can't escape Jamaica. Jamaica finds her. Her sister, who is in Jamaica, has found her in the US. The lady who is Jamaican, she finds out that she's actually Jamaican too when she's pretending to be an American nurse in the hospital. And you feel like there's no escape. It's just that it's just going to keep on going on and on. The last thing I want to touch on very briefly is that he speaks a lot. So there's a lot of music and lyrical, and he's a great writer. There's also, he talks a lot about homosexuality. Now, Marlon James is a proudly gay man. So a lot of the characters in the novel, well, not a lot, but a few of the characters in the novel are homosexual, and he deals a lot with the homophobia in Jamaican culture and in the Caribbean culture in general. I just finished reading this book by the Trinidadian author, actually, Love After Love, where it's a similar theme that's talked about with the homophobia. So we have Weeper, who is homosexual, but he is very embarrassed of the fact that he's homosexual, and everybody knows he's homosexual, but he pretends that it's only something he did when he was in jail, because that's the only time it's really acceptable is when you're in jail to have sexual relations with a man. But when he's in the US, it's like kind of whispered about. Everybody kind of talks about it and mentions it to Josie Wales, and Josie Wales himself, one time when he's pondering, he says, that's something I should have killed Weeper for a long time ago. So Marlon James really explores this whole homophobia, and a lot of them saying, you can't be a bad man and a batty boy. So this kind of like, if you are homosexual, you can't be fully male or masculine. Of course, he is equating maleness and masculinity with violence, because it's a violent society he's talking about. So he deals a lot with that as well. So it's really a book packed with a lot of themes that would interest a Caribbean reader. There is violence, there's language, there's identity, there's leaving your country and going to live abroad. There is morality, class, the different class conflicts. There's a bit of race because we have some people who are white Syrians, as he describes. We have black people. We have all the different races in between, and then it deals with a lot. It's a large novel. It deals with a lot. I don't even know if I've given the novel justice. Do I recommend it? I recommend it if you can stomach violence. It is a very violent book. For me personally, towards the end, I really wanted to finish it because I get very emotionally immersed in a book, and I was starting to get nightmares of, like the night when I read about Bam Bam being buried alive. I kept on dreaming that I was choking on something I can breathe, and I woke up in a start. So it affected me a lot emotionally, especially since you know that this is all based on true facts. So if you can read violence, then yes, I recommend it. If you can't, then probably you can read up on it. Or I think it's a good story, and you could probably get by just flipping past the pages that are very violent. But I do give that forewarning that it is a very, very violent, explicitly violent book. And it deals with a lot of sexual violence as well. So if you can't read that either, then you probably should take a pass or flip past those pages. But it is a very engaging book. The Audibles is very good. The cast is excellent in Audibles, and his writing is just superb. I will definitely read more of his work because I find his writing just so amazing. And I enjoyed it, even though it was so violent. There were times where I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Papalo. I really enjoyed Josie Wales' parts. Those two, I think, were my favorite. Which, since they were the two the two gang leaders, I don't know what that says about me, but still. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I hope it was interesting and you were able to stay for the full episode. I'll talk to you again next month with my next book. Thank you.